For the past 2 decades, it's been clear that the economic centre of the world is moving east. 50 years ago, we first heard the term the Asian miracle applied to the period of extraordinary economic growth in East and Southeast Asia from the mid-1960s to 1990s. Per capita gross domestic product in Asia's so-called tiger economies consistently rose by more than 7% a year during this period. Rising incomes were accompanied by improved education, health and life expectancy. Pragmatic leaders created environments that were conducive to economic growth. A service industry that made its appearance in Southeast Asia during this period was market research. For the first time, professional market research techniques enabled potential investors to identify opportunities and formulate products and services to meet the growing population's needs. Media research revealed ways to reach and inform them. The pioneer market research organisation during this period was known as the Survey Research Group. At its peak, the Survey Research Group was the largest employee-owned market research organisation in the world, with almost 3,000 full-time staff across 15 countries. It began in a private house in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, in January 1964. It was founded by a New Zealander, Newell Grenfell. Only 25 years old, Newell lived upstairs in the house. The office was downstairs. The name given to the business was Survey Research Malaysia, which was soon abbreviated to SRM. Newell had previously worked in the research department of a London advertising agency. His first clients in Malaysia were international producers of mass-market consumer goods, companies like Shell, Nestlé and Malayan Tobacco. SRM was the first market research firm to service such companies in Kuala Lumpur. Initially, Survey Research Malaysia also covered Singapore, which at this stage was part of the Federation of Malaysia. The field force in Singapore was managed on a part-time basis by an English lady, Enid Darby, whose husband was attached to the British forces in Singapore. The name Survey Research Singapore began to be used after Singapore became an independent nation in 1965, but clients continued to be serviced from Kuala Lumpur until 1970. The first graduate research executive to join SRM was Renika Chanda. Renu was married to Ramesh Chanda, who was a senior officer in the Department of Statistics. He advised Newell to buy the department's unique sampling frame and use proper probability sampling methods to survey the population.
All the surveys conducted at that time involved house-to-house personal interviewing. Questionnaires were prepared in the written versions of all the languages in which interviews would be conducted. The interviewers were briefed in person and thoroughly supervised. New insights on consumers were gleaned by qualitative research techniques, such as depth interviews and group discussions, which are now known as focus groups. It was initially thought that Malaysians might be shy to voice conflicting opinions in focus groups, but it turned out they weren't. Meeting in a relaxed setting, with a good supply of refreshments, groups were often happy to talk for more than 2 hours.
Halfway through the first year, SRM was asked to take in Alan Leung, a trainee research officer from a major company in Hong Kong, to learn how consumer research was handled in Malaysia. This led to Newell being persuaded to go to Hong Kong and open Survey Research Hong Kong. The first office in Hong Kong was on the 4th floor of Wing House, the smallest of these buildings on Connaught Road Central. The first general manager of Survey Research Hong Kong, who visited the SRM office in Kuala Lumpur for induction in 1965, was Clive West. Clive was succeeded by Ewan Blofeld, whose role in Hong Kong and the wider group lasted for 20 years. There was then interest in expanding to other countries. One client in Malaysia that was keen to be serviced in Thailand was Beecham, whose consumer products included Brylcreem, Eno, Horlicks and Ribena. Beecham's products were distributed in Thailand by a Swiss trading company, Detail, that had started its own in-house research department called Detail Marketing Research, DMR. Detail was persuaded to separate its research unit and drop the name Detail. When discussing a possible cable address for the unit, Newell suggested DMAR. "Brilliant," exclaimed Tasman Smith, the manager, who spoke fluent Thai. That could also be the name for the company. In Thai, Dima means very good. Consequently, by 1969, Dima was part of what was becoming known as the Survey Research Group.
The person who did more than anyone to establish the technical standards of the group was an Australian, David Greenhalgh. David had been deputy head of the surveys division of Britain's largest research company, AGB, before he went to Malaysia. He produced technical manuals, extended staff training, and later introduced computerization. David led the introduction of syndicated services like Media Index. Media Index was the first research service in Asia to provide advertisers, advertising agencies, media owners, and government with single-source data on mass media audiences. In later years, a nation profile study regularly probed readership of international magazines like Newsweek, Time, and Reader's Digest.
1971 saw the birth of the Survey Research newsletter that became SRG News. Its aim was to promote market research to new users and potential users throughout the region. Issue number 1 proudly displayed SRM's first computer, an IBM 1130, which occupied an entire room. On the back page was a personal profile of the first graduate research executive in Hong Kong, K.N. Tang, who went on to become Managing Director and eventually Chairman of SRH. At this stage, there were no external training courses for market researchers in Asia. Training was mostly on the job, though several potential high flyers were sent on Market Research Society courses in England. With the group now operating in 4 countries, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong and Thailand, there were requests to extend to the Philippines and Indonesia. Newell and David had a consultant at the University of Singapore who was willing and able to help. His name was Peter Weldon. On Peter Weldon's recommendation, InSearch Data became part of the group in Indonesia. InSearch later became Survey Research Indonesia, and David Sparks, who was recruited from England as a technical advisor, was a key part of SRG operations in that country for 18 years. In the Philippines, Consumer Pulse, founded by a former Procter & Gamble research manager, Rosie Chu, became an SRG company.
By 1974, television was spreading like wildfire. This created enormous demand for viewing data. Television ownership grew more rapidly in Southeast Asian capitals than it had in Britain or the USA. TV audience measurement became a major business. Motorcar ownership was also rising rapidly. A syndicated motoring index was developed and shared around the group.
At the end of 1977, after 14 years in Malaysia, Newell Grenfell moved to New Zealand, and Gordon Geraghty assumed a regional function from Singapore. Yong Kim Sang became Managing Director of Survey Research Malaysia. Chris Andrews was recruited to become Managing Director of DMAR in Thailand.
A crucial decision was made at an SRG meeting in Bali in 1979. At this meeting, the group decided to create a new post called Deputy Chairman for Coordination and Development. Peter Weldon, who had gone from the University of Singapore to the Ford Foundation, duly took up this position, effectively the first Group MD. With Peter Weldon coordinating developments, things moved faster. Gordon Geraghty moved south to start SRG Australia, with Graham Nichols as MD.
American companies were becoming more aware of opportunities in Asia. The group teamed up with Jerry Stafford to establish SRG International in New York. SRG International coordinated multi-country studies in Asia. By 1981, retail audits measuring distribution, stock levels and sales in a panel of retail outlets were up and running in the original SRG countries and rapidly spreading to others. Survey Research Taiwan was established, initially under the name Survey Research Asia Pacific, with Betty Jamie Chung as the first MD.
In 1982, we decided to merge with AGB to become for the first time part of an international network extending beyond Asia. David Syndon became the first Group Finance Director. Apart from the financial systems introduced in the AGB years, another benefit was TV technology. By the mid-90s, 5 SRG companies were using people meters to measure TV audiences.
The 21st anniversary of the group's founding was celebrated in Kuala Lumpur in 1985. The following year, David McCallum brought new technical skills to the group when he became Managing Director of Survey Research Singapore. The same year, SRG entered Japan through AGB Pacific's purchase of ASI Market Research. After working together for almost 10 years on multi-country surveys, Hankook Research officially became the SRG company in Korea in 1988. Having entered Asia's most affluent markets, the group's attention turned to the world's largest country, China.
From the late 1970s, Survey Hong Kong had been briefing delegations from mainland China. As China's open door policy developed, Louis Tong was asked to establish SRG in China. International companies realized the enormous potential of China and wanted reliable data, which SRG's rigorous sampling and field control provided. Unused to being asked their opinions, people in China were initially suspicious. The authorities had to approve every project. Only consumer research was allowed. To ensure there were no political questions, the questionnaires had to be submitted in advance for approval. The only soft drink available in China at that time was fizzy orange. An international company commissioned SRH to conduct a blind taste test in which the local product would be compared with the international one. When the head of the local district heard what was planned, he was amazed. "Why would you ask these people?" he said. "Just ask me. I'll tell you which they prefer."
Within 2 years, 50 projects had been completed. In 1992, SRG established the first joint venture market research company in China. When Newell visited China for the first time in the early 90s, officials described SRG as a partner in the economic development in China. SRG continued to introduce a wide range of new services. Survey Research Singapore, for example, developed telephone interviewing. Pulse and others developed syndicated studies on children and undertook research on issues like family planning. Most companies conducted major lifestyle studies. Additional attention was given to advertising research. To help clients obtain added value from their data, SRG Management Information Services was established in Kuala Lumpur to develop PC-based software applications. These products were widely used in Asia and also exported under licensing arrangements to Europe. In 1990, Unilever, an SRG client, released its in-house research department in the Philippines, Unisearch, to become an SRG company. Another sign of SRG's development was its gradual move to modern office blocks. Gold Hill Plaza in Singapore, the Bank Damala building in Jakarta, Devon House in Hong Kong, and the impressive offices of Survey Research Malaysia were a far cry from the house where it all began. Geographical expansion continued in the early 90s. Canada had become an important point of immigration from Hong Kong, and Canadian companies were seeking new markets in Asia. DJC Research accordingly became the SRG company in Canada. Surveys on tourism and travel were important projects. SRH undertook studies for a new Hong Kong airport, in addition to massive domestic travel surveys. Most SRG companies in Asia offered ADEX, Advertising Expenditure Monitoring. The group devised a regional study called the SRG Happiness Index. In order to obtain another range of specialist skills, marketing insights was brought into the group in Australia. The MRL Research Group in New Zealand offered a further range of skills, with extensive experience in agriculture, automotive, financial and public sector research. As memories of the Vietnam War faded, international companies saw the explosive potential of a country of 70 million people, half under the age of 20, and urged SRG to go into Vietnam. SRG Vietnam became operational in 1993. Also in 1993, SRG bought itself back from AGB and became the largest employee-owned research company in the world. A year later, on its 30th birthday in 1994, the Survey Research Group was acquired by Nielsen. the acknowledged global leader in marketplace intelligence, already operating at that time in 38 countries. So what were the secrets of SRG's success in the 30 years between 1964 and 1994?
Undoubtedly, a major factor was the extraordinary economic growth of East and Southeast Asia. For 2 decades in the 1970s and 80s, per capita incomes in most of the original SRG countries consistently grew at around 7% a year. The region saw steady population growth, and the people were well fed. They were increasingly well educated. While some retail selling methods remained fairly basic, there was also a rapid increase in sophistication. Supermarkets selling Japanese frozen foods and using scanning at the checkout emerged in every major city during this period. SRG was operating in an exploding media environment, not only television, but also radio and print media. People wanted to be informed. And in this environment, SRG was a multi-country source of marketing and media information. The company's management teams reflected the group's multicultural diversity. Asian graduates who began their research careers with SRG rose to the highest positions in group companies. Women rose to the top positions along with men. In fact, I recall being asked by a client at one point in the 1970s, "Have you any male directors?" The single word that best describes the uniqueness of the survey research group in my memory was commitment. SRG's commitment to quality began in the field, with accurate data collection. A story in SRG News told of an interviewer who walked for 6 hours to achieve an interview with a randomly selected medical worker in a rural village in Indonesia. We were committed to the use of modern information technology as it developed. Above all, we were committed to our core values of truth, honesty, teamwork, and respect for people, to serving our clients well, and to making a real contribution to economic and social development in the most exciting part of the world.